Those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Rashida Murray. I'm the Chief Digital and Media Officer for Spark Foundry Publicis, and I'm also the co-chair for the IB Data Council, working with this amazing team and JJ. So, sorry, I only get to do this once a year. I do fully agree with Moritz, and sometimes I try to say Moritz, but not say Morris. And we do have a knack in digital media for just having all of the bloody acronyms and making the language so hard. A part of me really loves it because it has given me a career as basically a translator to client meetings for the last 20 odd years. But sometimes we do make it really hard on ourselves. And more so, we make it hard for the kind of next generation of talent because we make it a little bit harder and a little bit more confusing than it needs to be. And as we're progressing towards agentic, we are at risk of losing people and therefore losing all of the guardrails and the quality that we've put so much effort building as an agency. So for the purpose of this panel, I just really want to go back to basics. What does good look like? What does flawless fundamentals look like for your various businesses? So I'll start with, again, just really the basics. We talk about first-party data, second-party data, third-party data, and I think we all kind of have a little bit of a sense of what that means. But in practice, what does good look like? And how is that different based on the category that you're operating and the type of business that you're operating? Jen, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. Would love to. I love this topic. It's like what Maurice was saying with the maps. That's probably me talking about first, second, and third-party data. First of all, is everyone familiar with the difference between second and third-party data? Otherwise,
you tell us. I think you're in a really good place to tell us.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So usually second-party data is referred to when you buy the first-party data from someone else with a direct partnership, or you buy it from a direct publisher directly. Third-party data is what used to be the gold standard for programmatic advertising. It's usually with a broker. It can have a bad rep. It can be inferred or modeled sometimes, but it doesn't have to. So often it really depends on the way you buy it, and that's why I'm going to refer with second and third-party data in one bucket at this moment, because for what I'm going to say, it doesn't really matter. So my point into a good data strategy, I think you need all of them, because your first-party data is really your gold standard. As I was saying before, it's your CRM, it's your email, it's people that know you, and all of us know it's cheaper to convert some people that have already engaged with your brand, that know you already, rather than new user acquisition. So you should really use that first-party data, have a good retention in place. But if you're only harvesting and only having that retention engine, it's something that you fall into, which I call the known audience trap. So you might grow, or you might stagnate at some point, because you only ever have those people that have already engaged with your brand, that have been to your website. So this is where second and third-party data comes into place. And now, probably some of you are saying, oh, but we already do prospecting. Which is great, we do prospecting as well, but prospecting can often be just something like interest and finance between 20 and 40. But there's a whole bunch of people out there that are currently in the decision-making progress for maybe the exact product that you are selling, that have never heard of your brand. So this is what we call a high-intent audience. So instead of someone interested in finance that might convert in the next 2 years, which is great too, that's why we do prospecting, you have maybe someone that has compared home loans 3 times in the last week, and they're surely not doing this because they don't have anything else to do. They are in a decision-making progress, and that's why I think for a good data strategy you need both. You need your retention engine and you need new user acquisition.
I like that, attention engine and user acquisition.
Thanks.
Adele, what's your take from your perspective?
Yeah, look, I think it's not about good data being first, second, or third. I think it's more about, is the data trusted, consented, and usable? And as long as you can tick those boxes, I think you can bring it into any kind of data party collaboration that you'd like to. And I think we've also, been talking or hearing a lot about zero-party data as well in this world recently, and not everybody's familiar with what that is, but essentially that is someone physically passing over their information to you, be it through a form or something like that. And I think that is probably the strongest intent signal they could give to your brand. So I think it's probably even more important today than ever before.
And do you want to explain for the rest of the audience, what do you see as the fundamental difference between zero and first-party data?
Look, I think we kind of combine the two into first-party data. That's essentially it. But zero really is data handed over physically, be it, as I said, through a form or a competition or something like that. First-party data could be other signals that you have picked up that hasn't been something physically entered into a form or anything like that. Yeah.
But for the sake of the strategy, you can bucket them and treat them.
I would just talk first-party data, to be honest with you. We have so much jargon in this industry.
I'm glad you got there. Mo, you and I work with a number of brands where we have this conversation all the time, and some of them, as you know, they don't have first-party data. Their products are in the supermarket or at the pharmacy. How do you kind of navigate this space and advise them?
Yeah. Look, I think it is about, even though you have first and second and third, or we're combining them, when you're laying out your data strategy, it's not that they don't have any first party, they just are not aware of what we categorize as first, or what they're capturing as zero, with some value exchange they might have on their website, for example, that people are willingly giving them their information. I think it's about looking at what your needed mix is of all three and why, and being very purposeful around why am I working with this partner who's going to give me these second party signals, or why am I leaning into this partner who's going to give me a third party signal, and then helping them to then apply those to the uses. So we usually go in and have a conversation. You probably have more data than you realize.
Yeah.
Here are the gaps that we see, and here are some recommendations on how we can help fill in those gaps with the right partnerships.
And what I'm kind of hearing from all of you is that there needs to be a level of collaboration between your own data strategy, your first-party data, your zero-party data, and then plug in the gaps based on your use cases, and partnering with people that will either bring in a second-party data or a third-party data to help you complete that picture. Maurice, from your perspective, as this kind of data collaboration framework becomes more common, I guess, what are the kind of key conditions, what needs to be part of the environment for it to be successful?
I'll speak to one soapbox I have. Don't assume value. Just because someone has a signal that they can give you, don't assume there's value. Test it, or evaluate it, or measure it. I think you made this point earlier. We had one client who shall remain nameless, but in the QSR category, where they were partnering with a certain data provider. And let's say, for example, they were had a second party relationship where they were paying for 100 different attributes. In our assessment, only 6 of them were helping to drive incremental outcomes or incrementality. So doesn't mean that data isn't valuable, but there were certain signals that needed to be. So understand with your data partnerships or how you're collaborating where that shared value exists, where it's either filling a gap, or where it's needed, or where it's needed for a time, but not in perpetuity, and really understand where those shared value is, and just don't assume it because they have cool data signals that we want to have.
Yeah, so a measurement framework that helps you kind of make sense of that is what I'm hearing, so you can measure what's actually useful and then what's kind of cool, which it's easy to kind of want to do cool things, like
exactly.
human nature.
And that's part of what we've done. We go in and say, look at all this data we have, and part of what we've done to the industry, and we come up with these cool acronyms and these great things, but what's actually driving outcomes? We have the tools now and the technology to actually help us assess it, and we need to teach our industry to do that more and do it more regularly.
Totally. Adele, from your perspective, what are the kind of key conditions for data partnerships to be successful in collaboration?
Look, the technology is obviously a really important one, but I think Maurice touched on starting with the outcome that you're looking for. What is that business objective? Asking yourself, what's the business problem I'm solving for, and figure that out before you even start anything. I think then governance and privacy of data is paramount. It's pretty much table stakes these days. So just making sure that you're connecting to other data partners in a really safe, decentralized way, and not moving or sharing any of your data. And then just lastly, making sure you have the ability to do something special with that data collaboration as well, like building your own bespoke network of partners that can bring value to your data that sets you apart from your competitors in your category.
Yeah, I like that. Jen?
Yeah, I thought the question would lean into technology, but I'm surprised because my answer, partnerships would also go more into the organizational readiness, because I think the technical capabilities have already outstretched the organizational readiness in some parts. So I agree with you two. It's really, firstly, the definition of success. So what do we actually want to achieve with that data? And then secondly, setting clear boundaries as well. So is this exclusive? Can I use it for insights? What can't I do? What can I do with this data? And then thirdly, and we sometimes struggle with that as well, is the genuine understanding of the technology. And I wish there would be more education on either sides with a partner anytime, so you can really understand what's going on. So that comes back to asking questions, really.
Okay, so I guess if I was to kind of take that as some of the foundationals we need to have in place for data collaboration to be able to be successful, you need to understand the use case and the outcomes that you're looking for. You need to have, I'm going to use the word interoperable kind of technology where things can communicate to one another, the right level of governance in place, and the level of measurements that would tell you which data and which attributes are actually driving your business outcomes. And if you had all of that in place, then I guess we can start to talk about what are you seeing to be most effectively translated into advertising and media outcomes. And for that, I'm going to come to Kevin. What are you seeing, Kevin?
I would say it's a shift from targeting to prioritization and optimization. I think from our standpoint, we want to be able to point in the right direction, as I was saying earlier, but ultimately we have to understand that there is a limit to the finality of that final signal that we can measure. And we have to look at it from a way that we can blend data sets together to understand the whole without having to give away too much of the privacy-sensitive data. I think from the context, even from earlier, on where to invest is a really important piece. Ultimately showing who we should be targeting as well in a privacy-centric approach. And really looking at the measurement piece, talking about the post-campaign outcomes to show the uplift and the activity. So with the business case in mind, we'll use those, we'll work backwards, I guess, from that view to understand how we can actually target and ultimately measure that effect.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. How about you, Lauren? What are you seeing on your side?
I would say that the only thing that sort of hasn't really been mentioned yet is that data only works if you can actually connect it. So if you have, let's say, 1 million people in your CRM, that doesn't automatically mean you're going to reach 1 million people with your digital advertising. If we sort of imagine like advertiser data island and publisher data island, you need a bridge in the middle to connect them. And that bridge is your identity graph. And what we're really looking for is how many people can cross the bridge and be recognized on the other side. So that would be your match rate. And the thing about match rate is that it's really been, we've been encouraged, I guess, to think about match rate as a performance metric, so like the higher, the better. But I think these days it's actually more akin to being a consent metric. So if only 30% of your audience is actually getting across that bridge and being recognized, that's 30% of your audience that you can target deterministically, let's say. That's good. That's who you should want to reach. The rest of your 70%, they're not lost to you. They just want you to target them in a different way, like the geo, for instance. So there are different methods that you can use. But where it breaks down is when you start to get into the problem of fragmentation. So where you have, let's say, different platforms that you're using for different channels, and you end up with multiple bridges or bridges that connect to bridges that connect to bridges. And suddenly you lose the visibility to deduplicate, you lose the visibility to know who's gone down which bridges, even if they're the same person or not, and you end up in crazy bridge land. Been there, not
How
fun.
many times can you say
kind of fun. The problem with that is that fragmentation then rolls down into your measurement, like you were saying. So how can you be confident that you can say that your strategy worked if the user journey is fragmented? And then the flow-on effect of that is you end up using those results to plan your next campaign. So you're already kicking off from an uneven step. And I think part of nailing your foundations is understanding that the choices that you make along the way are going to impact how you interpret the results. If you want to use 10 platforms, use 10 platforms. Just be cognizant of that and make that informed choice. And if you want to be efficient, find yourself an ID provider who has a wider bridge, a more well, not necessarily deterministic, but hopefully, but a wider bridge, more interoperable bridge. That would be my sort of advice.
I'm loving this bridge analogy and I'm stealing it. I'm absolutely stealing it.
In my mind, they're like glow-in-the-dark bridges.
Glow in the dark.
And if I can
If
add to
that makes
that, a bridge that allows you, there's not one way, it allows you to cross back over.
Yeah.
Because now...
Two-way bridge.
Yeah, two-way bridge. Because now so much important is not just what we're doing in paid media land, but then also what are we doing on our own properties.
Are you talking about log-level exposure data?
Oh my God, so many terms.
We said back to basics. Oh, that's great. So, about measurements, let's stay on that, because we also love a good measurement acronym. You know, we've got MMM that somehow gets talked about like it's not 30 years old. It's just, you know, I love a comeback, a glow-up story. So MMM, MTA, brand lifts, all sorts of different measurements. And I think, again, for the next generations of digital marketers coming through the ranks, how can they build the confidence that the signals that we're using as organizations kind of scale from a data maturity perspective for these measurement platforms? And how can you start to see the wood from the trees there?
Okay, I'll take that one. Now you're looking at me the whole
I
time.
am looking
so
at you the
yes.
whole time.
Well, I think when it comes to the measurement frameworks, there's a couple of assumptions, first of all. First is that the data that's feeding them is connected and that it's complete and that it's correct. So you haven't hopped over a million bridges to get there. So that's assumption number one that we're making. The second assumption, I mean, you went through a couple of the acronyms there, is that you almost have like a menu of measurement that you can pick from, which is not actually the case. It's not a hierarchy, it's not a menu. They're not all answering the same question, did it do well? They're actually asking very different questions and they're using very different touch points to get those answers. So I think that's really important to figure out what is the question you actually want to ask, and then question yourself, does my data and infrastructure layer actually answer that question? So like MTA is a great example, multi-touch attribution. If you're running a campaign across multiple channels and your identity graph has a hole, let's say you're serving also in a walled garden, then you're not able to do true multi-touch attribution. Same goes with path to conversion. You can't really make a sequencing meaningful, of exposures meaningful, unless you have that unified ID that actually stitches them all together. And even MMM, like you were talking about, it's not immune to this just because it's aggregated and not using the identifiers in the same way. If you're putting unstructured or incomplete outcomes and spend data into that, then your model is going to be flawed. Like you said, the quality of the signal is everything, and having a strong data and infrastructure layer is critical to every step of the chain. I think the way that you overcome that is you move that measurement conversation right up to the top. So when you're talking about KPIs and outcomes, you also need to validate, do we have the right signals, the right partnerships to actually measure this the way that we want, in a way that is accurate? Measurement can't be the afterthought or the add-on to the campaign at the end. It needs to be conversation number one.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say choosing the right data for the right question is really important. For example, I represent obviously spend data, but if you're looking for app downloads, that's not really the right way that I could be used. Now, you have to be able to look at it as one path to the answer, but we also need a ground truth that is known in a logical setting. So, for example, with the movement and side of things and spend, if you're visiting a location, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an economic uplift of that user. The ground truth could be that spend data actually proves that there was a visit because we've actually seen a tap of a physical card in those locations. So ultimately, that should have more weight in the overall ecosystem of that decision to benchmark against the other signals that you're looking at in the ecosystem.
Yeah. I love that because I completely agree, and I think one of the I work with a great data scientist who I like to describe as the the mad professor that you've seen in whatever cartoon. I can't say his name now, but if you know him, you know him. And it's always this menu of tools. I've got this tool, I've got this tool, I've got this tool. I'm like, what question are we trying to answer? Because I love the enthusiasm for the tools, but if we can bring it back, and then it's less about measurement at the end of the campaign, it's what part of this needs to feed the growth engine and what growth are we looking for, and therefore making sure that you do have the right data and the right tools in place from the early stage makes a lot of sense. Is there anyone who wants to add to that before I... Okay, good, because JJ's looking at me like, you've got 5 minutes. So let's talk about agentic, because it's 2026, I have to talk about agentic. I'm going to ask all of you, and I'm going to ask you to be snappy with it. As we look ahead, what does good governance look like in a way that enables organizations to move with speed while continuing to stay trusted over time, especially with the lens of agentic built into it? And I know we talked about it a little bit, but what do you think will make you maintain that trust?
Shall I start? Sure. I think good governments enable speed. So if you know what data you have, how you can use it, then you can move at speed without us having to ask our MD all the time what we can do with it. And especially for AI, I would probably always ask, what is that agentic capability allowed to do? Not what its technical capabilities are, but what data does it have access to? Does it need that data? And what can it decide on? Because otherwise, you're not quick, you're just unaccountable, and you need that core guardrails that JJ was talking about before.
Totally. Adele?
Sure. So there's good data, and then there's good governance. So good data being data I have permission to use, and data I can look at in terms of measuring my business outcomes, and then governance is how I'm connecting those data sources together. So again, just ensuring that they're connected in a very privacy-safe way, and no one's actually moving or physically sharing any of that data. And if you've got that foundation level right, then agentic AI will be a much easier game to play and build into your strategies.
Thank you.
For the sake of basics, I'm going to agree with you all. It's
That's
moving so
nice.
fast. We need to get the foundations and the guardrails right. So I agree with them.
Not to repeat again, but yes, I fully agree with the rest of the panel. I would say the knowledge of where the data comes from is going to be much more important as things change in the regulatory environment. And ultimately, we have to be able to trust that source and also be able to not have a black box through that source. So the sourcing of our partners is much more important than it ever has been, and it can't just be relied on a contract. The regulation looks like it will actually put the onus of liability into the user of the data now, and ultimately also adding complexity. It's now in derived data that also constitutes new PII. So ultimately, we have to very, very well know our data and where it's coming from to be able to use it in the right way for agentic and beyond.
Thank you.
I'm going to add a few new ones. Why not? I've got to do that. My answer might be a bit longer. I think there's a few things that you need, especially for agentic. I think, and I'm going to try and be brief, you need the right permissions, you need the consent and the data handling frameworks to be in there from the start. You need to have auditability. So you need to understand why an agent made a specific decision, because when the regulator or the client comes knocking, you want to be able to show that transparency, that you have the working out, you're not just marking your own homework. If I'm going to create an analogy, I think you almost said it earlier, it's the cockpit, right? So we know a pilot doesn't control everything in the modern aircraft, right? Autopilot does. But that only works because there's really clear guardrails about what autopilot does and what the person does. There are really clear alerts, at least I hope so, for when something is going outside of autopilot jurisdiction. And there's always that human there, the pilot, ready to take the controls if it needs it. And we don't call that governance, but that is essentially what it is, because it's the rules and framework for how you work with technology in a way so it's safe enough to scale. And with the pilot and the autopilot, it's safe enough that we as passengers understand it. That's how well understood their governance is. So our job is really to get our governance for agentic to that level whereby it's not just a policy piece of paper that no one reads, it's visible and it's understood by everyone well enough that we trust it.
I completely agree, and I think what a lot of you are describing is what Moritz talked about, in the sense that we all kind of know we don't want to be in black box alley, we want to be in AI alley, we want it to be nice and clean, and governance, for example, is really critical. I'm just going to add to that with my IAB hat on, that maybe standards, because if your governance is different from your governance, is different from my governance, then we're still not quite talking the same language. So I think absolutely, and then industry standards in terms of what we all want to see good look like is going to be really important. Here's a task for us. All right, pretty rapid fire one. I'll start with you, Loz, and we'll work our way back. What's one piece of wisdom that you have from your many, many years of working in data? I'm making you sound so much older. That you think will serve you well in the agentic years to come?
So when I first started in ad tech, I kid you not, I was in a meeting once with my old boss. I was hoping he'd be here so I could call him out, but he's not. But he used 64 acronyms in a 30-minute meeting, and I know because I didn't understand a word he was talking about, and I just took a tally. So I made a little acronym for myself. It's DAMAS. You remember it because it's like the Gwen Stefani song. You're all singing it in your heads now. I'm not singing it out loud, but you all know the song. Basically what it stands for is don't always make alphabet salad. Don't always use acronyms. If you need to use the acronyms, the job is to learn what it actually means before you get the privilege of using the shortcut. Because if you do use acronyms and you don't know what they mean, then you end up sounding like what Damas actually spells.
From my side, I would say, and this is going to sound sacrificing a little bit as a guy who sells data, but don't rely on too much data. I would say being able to trust a small sample of your data and some third-party data, I think, is going to be very important. There's a lot of noise out there and a lot of different competing truths out there. You want to make sure that you're choosing the right data set at the right time for the right purpose.
I don't know if I can answer this because I'm only 23. I've only been doing this for 2 years. Didn't have to laugh that hard. Look, I constantly remind myself to don't focus on what's changing, focus on what stays the same, and let that guide. We've been trying to understand consumers in multi-dimensions, since she was born. It used to be just the local grocer, when you walked in, knew that you just had a baby, but also knew what products you bought, and just understanding that. Now we're able to do that faster, more accurately, differently. And so it's like staying true to those truths and knowing how technology can get you to what we've always been trying to do, not necessarily do something new and create new acronyms.
For me, it's reminding myself that data is actually about people, real humans. So you get excited about, your algorithms and your platforms and everything, but at the end of the day, every record is a real human with a real decision and a real relationship. And I think the brands that recognize that the most are the ones that are going to deliver the best brand experience for their customers.
Yeah, I'm going to go with... remember when AI used to be really misogynistic and racist because it learned of the internet, and even now, AI gives you the answer that. yeah, that's right. Like I put in the other day, me and my partner, 40 and 37, are gonna do the Overland check, and AI was like, "Yeah, cool. Your husband 40 and you 37." And I was like, "Babe, no, I got the younger husband. No." So I'm gonna come like really fundamental. Data quality is where the data is coming from. That's it.
A big round of applause for our panel. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it looks like a question, I think.
Yay!
Well, do we have people? Has anyone got a question?
Do we have questions from the floor? Here we got one here. Oh, no, sorry. There.
Hi, thank you so much for that. That was awesome. I'm Nick Hayes from the Media Store, and I had a quick question that's a bit of a springboard on some of the things you touched on around, as a group, around organizational readiness and how you bring measurement to the top. And I feel we have this interesting dual track where clients, their marketing teams are shrinking, their budgets are shrinking, there's no longer the UX or the analytics team members in arm's reach for them, their CRM team is on the other side of the building, they don't deal with them so much anymore. And then on the other track, you've got your Meta and your Googles and whatnot requiring server-side data integration, requiring real-time, high-resolution information to work. And so I guess with all of that in mind, are you finding that your services with your clients are expanding into, say, almost like a marketing consultancy space, or is the scope expanding to help them get into first gear? And if yes, what is that sort of first step? How are you getting them to see that if they don't start to make some of these changes and with your guidance, you know, they might not be able to operate online in media in the same way in 6 months?
Do we have a taker for that question?
Oh, down. I'll give it a crack. First of all, I'd probably say I'd refuse to accept the premise that any sort of brand is going to fall behind or become not sophisticated enough to be able to continue working in online media. While, yes, there's a lot that is changing, a lot of new opportunities, as Mo, you said, there is a lot that is still staying the same. You can still operate without first-party data, and you can have a really strong performance without first-party data, and you don't just have to stick to broad-reaching strategies either. There's a lot of way to layer data and do that in a cost-effective way. I've forgotten the other part of your question. Are we expanding like their marketing team services? I would probably say only in the extent of through education. That's probably where we feel like we can help the most. I think probably a lot of us, I'm going to guess, are in a similar boat where there's teams are shrinking and resources are shrinking. We have to be more mindful of how we're servicing clients and trying to help them where they need help in the right way. I think agentic, whether you think it or not, is actually going to be a big solve for that. Not in the sense that it just makes us more efficient, but I think once we crack agent to agent, there is going to be new ways of working that don't exist yet. So if I think of data collaboration as an example, if you wanted to query a range of different third-party data providers, if you wanted to do that today, it's like 10 different emails and you wait up to a week, and then if you want to mingle it all together, it's quite expensive. But in imagination agentic land, which may not be that far off, you can query and build a composite audience with all the right permissions in place. You could do that in 2 minutes, you know. So I think there's going to be some really interesting ways of working that are going to be invented in the next, let's say, 6 to 24 months that might help those ones who are struggling, but the education needs to go hand in hand with that.
Just a quick add-on to that. Visa has some consulting services, obviously, from my division, and certainly across the marketing space as well. But we're really relying on our partner network as well to provide some of that guidance. I know some of the people even in the room with the Kiko Labs guys up there, or them and others obviously out there in market that are getting the industry ready for agentic commerce, getting it ready for the data clean room initiatives, asking the right questions right from the get-go. I think that is important, and there are players in the ecosystem that can provide the guidance with our data as well.
One quick thing. I will add to this, probably more philosophical than it's practical, but this industry is changing, and we're talking a lot more, not just services, but solutions and products in terms of that. We need to start challenging ourselves to talk to our clients differently about the value they're going to get. You know, more in a business case language. You know, SaaS platforms do that all the time. You know, when I talk to a client about a solution, I'm coming in with, we've done this is the incremental growth we're going to get by doing this differently. That's a very different conversation they can now take internally to get the approvals they need. And I think we need to start training ourselves up on how to speak in that language more, to get that buy-in, to get that trust, to get that confidence that we're not just throwing something cool or a new acronym at them. We actually know what their business needs and how to drive that future growth. It is a skill set, and you need to practice doing it.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Thank you. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you to our panel.